Geeky blog. I am your host and writer behind 99geek.ca, Andrew Geczy. As primarily a fiction writer releasing chapters of my books in weekly chunks on my Patreon, like episodes of TV shows when I'm not making ends meet in what feels like a poverty nightmare, I wanted my brand, 99% Geek, to offer more than just my writing, pulling from my many interests and passions. I don't have much to offer in the way of talent besides my writing, but I'm passionate about pop culture and try to keep myself as up to date on politics, science, and art as I can. Being a huge TV nerd, I run down the best shows of the week, go over all the major news headlines for people who have maybe gotten too tired to follow regular news, breaking it down and explaining it for people who might feel unable to follow along. And before anything else, I spotlight something cool and geeky for the week. Remember, you can follow along by going to patreon.com/99geek. This is Geekly Weekly number 91, I believe. Yep. Um, for the week of Friday, March 26th. And this week's highlight is the Monsterverse. If you're not aware what the Monsterverse is, then you probably also aren't aware that Godzilla vs. Kong is coming out this week, but you probably are aware because there are advertisements for it literally everywhere. You cannot go like 10 minutes watching TV without hearing the words, Kong bows to no one. And that's very important. You gotta know that. Everyone in the world, I think, already knows that now. Kong bows to no one. Don't forget that. I'm super excited about this movie. I kind of love these movies. They often get mixed reactions from critics, and I think that encourages people to not really give them a chance, and that's too bad because I think the movies are great. Not flawless, not the best stories ever told, but they are fun and crazy in all the best ways. Not fun in a parody sort of way. Like it's almost more fun that everyone in these movies takes the concept so seriously and are so over the top about it. In the trailer for the new movie, every time Rebecca Hall says "Kong bows to no one," I get chills, even though it happened repeatedly in every TV spot. I'm just like, yes, let's do this, because it's just so overdramatic and ridiculous. This world is that's the kind of world you're signing up for. It's just one of just over dramatic ridiculousness where everyone's taking it super seriously. And why shouldn't they? I mean, to them, it's their very livelihood. You know, millions of people are dying constantly. Really, they should be taking it more seriously, but whatever. The first movie is the most disappointing for people who haven't yet given a chance and are thinking about it. I just understand that the first Godzilla movie released in 2016, I believe, by Garth Edwards, um, is not the best one in the franchise at all. It is flawed. Worse, it's the most boring of the movies. The other movies are far from boring, but this movie is so boring that it spends half the movie building up to a fight that they then skip. It's a huge disappointment and a strange direction choice having all this build up to a fight and then cut to black and it's over. Apparently, the crew was worried that the fight would be too similar to the fight at the end, so they just cut it, which is mind blowing to me. And that moment hits you like a brick wall where even if it was engaging, no one can watch that the first time and not stop and be like, what just happened? But if people can get past that, the fight at the end is pretty decent, worth giving the movie at least a single watch. But it's in Kong Skull Island when they really hit their stride. Kong Skull Island somewhat shares the story of Peter Jackson's King Kong, but a lot of times where you'd expect the story to zig, it'll zag instead. One example is in John C. Reilly's character, who brings a dynamic that didn't exist in the Jackson version. Also, Brie Larson is great with her connection with Kong. Samuel L. Jackson is a military leader with an Ahab/Moby Dick like obsession to Kong, as in he's Ahab and Kong is Moby Dick, which really takes the center stage of like the whole movie. In some ways, Tom Hiddleston is the least interesting part in the movie, playing the stereotypical Adrian Paul role. Thankfully, the movie doesn't let him overshadow all the aspects of the movie that work and work well. And as I was saying about the story zigging instead of zagging, instead of there being a final act that takes place in New York, in the real world, so to speak, um, that doesn't happen in this time. They don't take Kong off the island. Just kind of everything happens on the island, and it zags in a different direction that kind of builds up to something cooler and more interesting. And in my opinion, it's a better movie than the Peter Jackson's movie. Going back to watch the old Peter Jackson movie, I don't know if it holds up as well as some people think it does. Some people were critical of it to begin with, and I wasn't as critical of it, and I almost feel like of my last few times watching at least the last couple times watching the movie. I mean, I don't watch it all that often. It's a long movie. But the last couple times I watched it, I couldn't help but feel like maybe the critics were more right than I thought. There are certain parts that just are cringe. Um, So don't go back and watch Peter Jackson's King Kong. Just focus on these MonsterVerse movies, and they're pretty strong, in my opinion. Especially these last two, as in Kong Skull Island, and then the next one, which is Godzilla King of Monsters, which was great. I've heard people have had issues with it. The main complaint I've heard from someone was that it didn't understand what made the original movie great, which it wasn't meant to. That was the first movie, and the first movie didn't do a great job of that either, but that's that movie's problem. This movie is meant to be a love letter to all the classic Godzilla versus this or Godzilla versus that Japanese movies, to the point where they bring in monsters like Mothra and Ghidorah, and they bring in classic characters like the twins. The soundtrack has classic sound cues and themes from the old movies, and the whole movie is just an amazing nostalgia for a specific time in cinema. I've always had an interest in those old movies, but never really dived in, which means that this movie made me feel nostalgia for something I shouldn't even have nostalgia for. And unlike the first Godzilla, this movie never builds up and then doesn't pay off. This movie delivers on practically everything it promises and deserves better credit than people give it. A lot of complaints in all of these movies is that there's just too much of a focus on the human stories, and I think that's a dumb complaint. That's a complaint made by someone who doesn't understand storytelling and how writing works. To be able to effectively display the scale and stakes of these characters, you need the human element. You need humans trying to survive, and those humans need to have wants and needs and characteristics and motivations. It's kind of funny because you have one side of the spectrum of people who treat this movie like they are nothing more but monsters beating the shit out of each other, and it's like, ew, that's gross. I don't want to watch some dumb movie where it's just big monsters punching each other in the face. Um, where was I? And they are deeper than that. And the performances that are given by the actors who are trying to world build a world that lives alongside these monsters, it's very necessary to the movie. And with actors like Rebecca Hall, Millie Bobby Brown, and Ken Watanabe, it's pretty damn engaging too. And then you have the other spectrum of people who want the movies to just be monsters fighting each other and don't care how compelling the human performances are. It's ruining their dumb monster fighting movie. You kind of can't please either audience. They're going to stand on either side and yell their hate at these movies no matter what. Don't be that person. Watch these movies and enjoy them for what they do well and forgive them their flaws, but not too much. It's okay not to rate them as the best movies ever made. Doesn't mean they are not a hell of a good time though. Just enjoy yourself. Like feel free to hate them if you want, but try to watch them and just let go of your disbelief and just enjoy the fun craziness that is huge monsters beating the shit out of each other. All right, moving on from there to the Geekly Weekly TV rankings. This is where I rank all the shows that were interesting and came out this week. I don't necessarily watch everything on TV. I try to watch everything good on TV, but there's always this or that that I miss. For instance, I'm not keeping up with For All Mankind. It's a show that I probably should have. I probably should have watched the first episode. I've been like, this is awesome, and kept watching, but I didn't. So I mean, that something like that doesn't make the list, but it probably should. And that's The Boys. I think is another one where I think season one they released the whole season as one thing, and I was like, okay, one day I'll get to that, whatever. And then I never did. And now season two is releasing episode by episode. It's like I would be following along because that sounds awesome. I just couldn't because I'm not caught up. I'm sorry. So I'm sorry for shows like that. I will try to do my best to catch up on some of those important ones and then give them their necessary accolades. For instance, with For All Mankind and The Boys, maybe I'll manage to catch up on the shows before their next seasons come out, and then I'll be able to follow them along with everything else. But that's if I can find time to do that. And right now I'm trying to catch up on a whole bunch of other things. I'm doing a rewatch of Star Trek and Pokemon, and I'm a nerd, shut up. So starting at the bottom of the TV weekly rankings with The Walking Dead is again at the bottom of the list. I actually don't think it was on the bottom of the list last week. Last week it was kind of fun because it was Gabriel and he was being weird, and I'm not even usually a fan of Gabriel, but he was really good last week. But this week was not, in my opinion, a great episode. I think there were redeeming aspects to it, and like you could appreciate the performance of the actor, and you could appreciate, I suppose, the portrayal of mental illness. I think that was what they were trying to go for. And so I felt like there were aspects that were strong. And I think it did a good job of personifying Princess. I'm just not a huge fan of her character. and I found a lot of the episode just to be boring and tedious. It's hard enjoying a show when you know a lot of what you are seeing is in your character's mind. It's also hard enjoying a character when you know that she is a huge liability to the characters you like. Again, I thought there were things that were done well, but at no point was it ever actually an enjoyable hour of television, which is the biggest issue, you know? It's too bad when there are episodes of The Walking Dead that literally feel as if you're being as tortured as the characters on the show. And this was, in my opinion, one of those episodes. But I give it 2.5 stars anyway because it certainly there were strong aspects to it. It just didn't feel like a fun time. Moving on from there to number 9 on the list, Superman and Lois with 3.5 stars. This wasn't a super strong episode, but it was able to hold itself up. This week was honestly a strong week for all 3 CW shows. Strong but flawed. And this episode's biggest flaw was just being kind of boring, much like The Walking Dead. And thus gets the bottom slot. Batwoman was more consistent, and The Flash was more entertaining. That said, I found myself at least interested in the various turning gears. I also enjoyed Lex this week. Everything Lois was up to as usual was good stuff. The Superman action was well done as per usual, and the plot seemed to be thickening somewhat. In a very comic book way, mind, but we're not supposed to notice that. We're too busy caught up in that amazing family drama. I should put that in quotations. The amazing family drama. This week the emo kid was less emo, and the less emo kid became more emo instead, because we have to have at least one person yelling at their parents at all times. Sarah, Lana's daughter, was also extra emo this week, but she's allowed. She can do whatever she wants as far as I'm concerned. I like her. Jonathan seems to see her in a similar light, so that makes him a little more likable. I even like the part near the end of the episode where she's pretty much friend zones him, and instead of reacting negatively, he just reacts positively and says, "Well, that sounds like it'll mean more time to spend with you as your friend." And it's like, cool. That's a good reaction. Well done, sir. Finally, the flashbacks really dragged the episode down, dropping it 0.5 star. It was tied with Flash and Batwoman, but now it's at 3.5 stars. Where next on the list is The Flash with 4 stars. This was the best episode of The Flash so far this season, in my opinion. Not that that's saying much. The last few episodes have been largely lacking. This episode did a good job of diving into the cleanup after the last episode's climax. Seeing as usually we got a whole summer between a finale and a premiere, we don't usually see the fallout quite in that way, which was cool. There was some good humor and some good drama, though the handling of Iris's PTSD was somewhat inconsistent and seemed to have been cured by the end of the episode. Maybe? I wasn't as cold on Flash talking down the villain as others were, though I do feel like they just waved away Magician Man's murder of that random guy at the beginning of the episode. Like, they were just like, well, we stopped you from destroying the city, so I guess you're a good guy now. You can leave. And it's like, really? He still murdered people and did horrible things before you finally talked him out of being evil. But whatever. Finally, the twist at the end, both the big strong guy and the Frost reveal, were reasonably strong moments for the episode, ending strong. Lots of strong. It was strong, okay? Just not strong enough. I almost put this above Batwoman, however, I feel like Batwoman was just a little bit more consistent. And so number 7 on the list is Batwoman, with 4 stars. It was a strong episode of Batwoman this week, getting stronger as it went on, and then ending on not so great a cliffhanger. I still feel like Batwoman's illness was incredibly inconsistent, but there were a lot of great moments this week, including the skydiving scene and every scene with Alice. Mary and Luke fighting off that assassin was a lot of fun. It was nice seeing that one British girl again, whatever her name is. But she had no reason to just randomly show up then. Just as it was very convenient how Ryan's plant happened to be the desert rose. Like, how did that happen? I didn't love Sophia, or however you spell her name. In fact, I enjoyed her bodyguard more, and kind of sort of wish that the actors were switched. I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy. Um, or maybe it's some latent racism. I mean, I believe Sophia is more of a person of color, so am I literally just saying that I wish she was more white? I don't know. Um, Forget I said that. Anyway, and now that she's dead, that sucks. The bodyguard, I mean. I'm also glad Ocean isn't dead, and burning the roses was quite a power move by Alice. My biggest disappointment of the episode was Kate showing up at the end, recast. I was just thinking how smart it was that they didn't kill or recast her, with the actress saying she'd be willing to return for the odd episode, and the very next week they make her reappear, recast. Disappointed. One of the few disappointments in a nonetheless engaging episode. As I said, it was consistently engaging throughout, despite whatever issues I might have had with where the story led to. Moving on from there to number 6 on the list, The Goldbergs. I wasn't sure where to put this. I reviewed this after reviewing all the CW shows. I almost considered splitting up that that block there, but they all felt so connected uh, and thematically connected. But this was a fun episode of The Goldbergs this week. A lot funnier even than the premise had any right to be. One of those episodes where the jokes outshines the plot. I could have cared less about Barry trying to compete with Jeff over their friendship, but the fun to be had with him dating Jeff's sister was great. Jeff freaking out, Erica kind of shipping them. I enjoyed it. The A plot with Beverly trying to ruin Adam's relationship was annoying, but again had a lot of fun elements that kept it from dragging me down. Marie tackling him at the door was a particular delight, and thank God, there was no way that was going to end well. I thought they were breaking up that episode. I thought that them as a couple were breaking up that episode. Finally, it was sad to see the grandfather, knowing that the actor literally passed away this week. My condolences to him. I believe his name is George something. Let's look him up. The Goldbergs. George Segal. He was 87 years old. That's really sad. I believe he was in a lot of other things, but I mainly just know him for The Goldbergs. George Segal. There's pictures of him throughout his career. That's him as a younger man. Well, that's fascinating. Virginia Woolf. Apparently he was in Virginia Woolf. I've never seen that. But he was great on the Goldbergs. He was fun. Oh, there he is with the mustache. So you're getting if you're watching the video version of this, you're getting a little extra fun here. Seeing pictures of look at him. There he is on the Hollywood star thing. Is that his star? Is he getting his own star there? That'd be pretty. Yeah, I guess so. I guess he's got his own star now. It's awesome. Congrats. That's so cool. So yeah, it's too bad. He was a great actor, and he had a great role on that show, and we're gonna miss him. It's gonna be a void, and I don't look forward to when the show is going to address his passing because they said that they will be having a episode that deals with that. So I wonder, that's probably going to hit me in the feels. Moving on from there anyway. Number 5 on the list, American Gods, is 4.5 stars. This was a good finale of the season, even though last episode honestly felt like a pretty good finale too. I was pretty engaged throughout, yet was still left feeling like it was a weaker episode than last week. It also took some weird directions and weird turns, especially with Shadow's sudden huge ego. His personality just seemed to change to jerk in the last 10 minutes of the episode when he's always been such a nice guy up till then. And the tree thing was weird, right up until the reveal happened, and I gotta admit, it was a pretty good reveal. I'm both hot and cold on some of the revelations in this episode, but I'm definitely hot on the performances and direction. Again, except for some of the tree stuff which looked a little wonky. Everything with Mr. World and Tech Boy was great, and I always loved Laura Moon. This show keeps me holding on for another season, I guess. I guess that's what I'll be. I guess that'll be what, in 2 years, like every other season? Oh, finally, I'm super glad Ian McShane apparently isn't leaving the show. He's great, even if his character is such a dick. I am a little worried on that front that perhaps we're leading it like we didn't see Ian McShane show up. We saw him taking Shadow Moon's place, but I'm concerned that maybe he's taking his body too. We didn't think about that, but I guess we'll find out next season. Moving on from there, Are You Afraid of the Dark with 4.5 stars at number 4. This was a really good finale of the show. I wouldn't say it was the best episode of the show, and there were a couple of finagles, but it overall did a good job of keeping me engaged and wrapping up all the plot threads. They even brought back the little girl, which I thought was kind of cool. I thought it was so horrible how they killed her, but then it turned out she was never traumatized at all and is perfectly okay. That's sweet. I think I preferred the mystery of saving them from the lighthouse as opposed to the second half of the episode, which was about them going back in time and stopping the curse from ever happening. Trying to save that girl's life in the past wasn't bad, but there were some logic and fallacies. Like, how did the main guy suddenly know so much about what would happen when they cast a spell? He was all like, the Shadow Man will know that
Once we go back in time, the Shadow Man will know that we exist. He'll be able to come at us, and we'll have to be ready for him always coming at us.
And it's like, how do you know this stuff? Have you done this before? Because you're acting like you've done this before. Normally, we'd have some sagely character who would set up that sort of conflict, but this time it was just the kid just knowing this stuff for no reason, even though he should have no idea what he was talking about. And you can't tell me that, and you can't tell me that, or and you can't tell me that some of his other logical conclusions in his final plan were logical conclusions for him to come to, because a lot of them weren't. Why did he send Seth? Man, a lot of typos here. But why did he send that kid Seth down to the breakers? How did he know on top of everything else that the breaker switch would be turned off? What was he, Doctor Strange, and he already saw all 1 million possible outcomes? Regardless, despite the logic fallacies, everything was done well. The performances were great, and it was a good wrapping up of all the storylines, and thus a pretty good finale. Oh, also the kiss at the end with Little Forest. And the look on her face after she does it, where she's like, "Oh my God, what an accident this was!" But like, it was super forced, so it didn't look at all like an accident. Yeah, didn't really work. But those are small finagles in an otherwise great episode. And then we are in the top three of the week. Bum ba da 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 dum bum bum bum. At number three, Shameless with 4.5 stars. A really good episode of Shameless this week, one of the stronger ones of the series. A lot of characters who have been making crappy choices all season were more endearing this episode than usual. Lip with Liam at the end was sweet, but his moment with Debbie was sweet too. Kevin trying to keep track of his kids was fun. Did he ever find them? I don't remember them wrapping up that storyline. Frank trying to do that caper wasn't great, but it was fun when reaching out to his old crew and things like that. Um, and I enjoyed that aspect of it, and sort of dealing with his dementia and going into it. And he goes to each of them, and he goes back to the first one again, and it's like, "Hey, I got an idea," and it's like, "Man, you already came and talked to me." Uh, Carl's thing with the swap was funny, but not that funny. Like there were moments of funniness, and it was somewhat light because I guess there's a lot of other things going on in the episode. I'd say this show's strength was more in keeping me. This episode's strength was more in keeping me engaged in the drama than with the comedy. The funniest parts were Mikey and Ian trying to bury his father, which is ironic. All in all, it was a strong episode, just maybe not in the usual way. Moving on from there to the number two slot, Pennyworth, with 4.5 stars. Like we all know what number one's going to be. This was a great episode this week. A lot of drama, but also with some very powerful moments. I love the scene in the bar with the song "We'll Meet Again." We'll meet again. Don't know where, don't know when, but I know that we'll meet again some sunny day. I loved everything with Bet trying to save Harwood. I'm pretty sure that song isn't copyrighted. I hope I don't get struck for that. I mean, I was singing Orby anyway. It's too bad they had to run. I also love Thomas and Lucius getting drunk together and going to talk to Martha. I was riveted when that one woman Alfred was cheating with faced down her husband, and my God, was that a hell of a fight. This whole episode was just so strong. I was ready to give it 5 stars, but then the scene with the plane happened. The plane that we have been building up to literally for the entire season. There has not been an episode that hasn't discussed this plane. Multiple episodes were solely focused on them getting on this plane. And when the plane finally happens, every single main character decides not to go on it. Every single main character. And then you would think, okay, honestly, I thought maybe the plane was going to explode or something. But then not even that happened. So the plane was a complete non event, which is great for misdirection, I guess, but not so great when you remember that's been the sole focus of this entire season, all to be used to write two inconsequential characters off the show in a nice, peaceful way. Very weird. The episode was amazing, though. It's just a big misdirect. It's just that the big misdirect sort of invalidates this entire season so far. So 4.5 stars is what I give that in total. Great episode. Uh, Kind of feels like the season's been a bit of a waste, but what can you do? Moving on from there to the number one spot, Falcon and the Winter Soldier with 5 stars. 5 whole stars. It's obvious that the story is just beginning here. We went in knowing nothing about Falcon's family, and this show had to build everything pretty much from scratch. It had a lot of pieces put into place, and we didn't even get all the pieces in the first episode. I'd almost give this episode 4.5 stars, but that one action scene at the beginning looked so good. When we were gliding through the canyons, I've never seen a TV show look that good. But also, even the slower parts were compelling. In fact, the fight scene at the beginning felt sort of shallow. We were rushed into it, and it was beautiful and amazing, and then yada yada away from it again. Did it matter at all? I liked the stuff with Bucky and his therapist. I liked Sam dealing with the hardships with the bank. I wanted to see him do right by his family. So the action was fantastic, but shallow. The drama was slow, but deep. Not a perfect episode, but never a moment that I wasn't enjoying myself and the show. A show doesn't have to be perfect to be a 5-star experience. Also, US Agent and Flag Smasher are totally the same person, right? Based on the law of conservation of characters, it's almost a guarantee. I give the odds 75% right now. Actually, you know what? I've had a different theory. I'm going to lower that to 70% odds, and then I'm giving Bucky 10 to 15% odds that it could be him. No, 10% odds for it's him. So now we're at 70% odds that it's US Agent Flag Smasher, 10% that it's Bucky, and maybe he doesn't know, or maybe he does know and it's got something to do with because apparently Sam suspects it's him. I don't know where that came up in the first episode, but people were saying it like that's a thing. So I guess Sam suspects it's him. It's like, and when I was looking at pictures, it was like, well, the hair, kinda. But then the third option for the last, so that's 80%, and then the last 20%, I'm thinking it could just be maybe it's Baron Zemo. Maybe he got a super powered upgrade. So it's 20% chance it's Baron Zemo, 70% chance it's US Agent, and then 10% chance it's Bucky. That's what I'm going with right now. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. I did the math, guys. I did the math. It's okay. Trust my numbers. Moving on from there to the Geekly predictions. What will people be talking about around the water cooler? There's a lot of things this week. Like, a lot of things. This was one of the biggest weeks for releases that I've seen in a long, long time, especially considering last week was so light. I'm kind of shocked how big this week was. Starting at the top, Godzilla vs. Kong on HBO Max comes out on Wednesday. I think it's also hitting theaters. You can go to theaters if you want. You can watch it on HBO Max, or if you're in Canada, I don't know what you do. It might be on Crave, but that's going to be disappointing because Crave sucks. I'm excited for it. You already know. I've already said a lot. Ooh, water. We're going to go with the water break. Delicious. And I have something that happens in an hour, so we've got an hour to do this in the news, but I believe we can do that in an hour. We're good. So we know how awesome Godzilla vs. Kong is going to be. That's out on Wednesday. That's super exciting. That's this week. That's just before the next Geekly Weekly, so I'll even be able to talk about what I think about it probably next week. I kind of wonder, should I have like a review section? I feel like that's sort of what the TV weekly rankings is, but should I do that for other things too? Or just have a section where I review random things like whatever movie or game I played or whatever? I don't know. You guys can comment or whatever, tweet me or whatever, and give me your opinions if you think strongly either way. Moving on from there to the number 2 Geekly prediction of the week, Invincible is coming out on Amazon, and that actually apparently just came out today. My Geekly Weeklies go Friday to Thursday, so therefore this Geekly Weekly includes everything up to Thursday, and then therefore does not include the Falcon and Winter Soldier that already released, and doesn't include Invincible that apparently released, I believe, the first 3 episodes is what I saw. I have heard mixed reviews about it, that the story is as fantastic as it is in the books, but that the animation doesn't necessarily hold up in the same way, which I think could be fine. I think I might be able to forgive it of that somewhat, because I love the comic books. I have not read all of the comic books. I read the first couple volumes, and it's something where it's just I've intended to go back to it, and now I've kind of got a different direction with my comic books. I kind of started from the beginning now, and I'm reading everything from like 1930. So I'm quite a long way from ever catching up on Invincible as a comic book. But what I read, I loved. I got really into it. I got really into the characters and the world that it builds, and the way it tells its story is fun. And therefore, I'm really looking forward to this show. I think it's going to be fantastic, and I think everybody should at least give it a chance. That's Invincible on Amazon. Just expect that maybe some of the animation might be a little lower budget than some people were expecting. I think some people were expecting it to look amazing all the time, and I think it apparently looks amazing during the action scenes, and then when it's not an action scene, it can get a little static.
which is a similar complaint I've seen. I've not seen, but I've personally had that complaint watching things like Young Justice. Young Justice can look great when characters are moving and fighting, and then when it's people talking, it almost seems like it's just you're watching a still image with the mouth moving. Um, so I kind of expect that that's going to be what this cartoon is going to be like, and I'm able to forgive that. I forgave it with Young Justice and was still able to enjoy the story. And I know that Invincible has a really strong story, so everybody should check that out. And that was its second Geekly production. Number 3 on the list, The Mighty Ducks Game Changers. As I said, this is a huge week for releases, especially like today, because Mighty Ducks Game Changers came out on Disney Plus today. And it looks really fun. If you're a fan of the classic Mighty Ducks movies, it looks like it's a good time. If you're not a fan of the Mighty Ducks movies, you might still want to check out that trailer because it looks fun even for people who aren't huge hockey fans. It just and I mean, the Mighty Ducks to begin with are pretty good movies, even if you're not huge hockey fans. Like they're these underdog stories, the classic sports underdog stories, and those kind of movies. Like I mean, I'm not a big baseball fan, but I think I've enjoyed the odd baseball movie every once in a while. I certainly enjoy what's that one? Angels in the Outfield. Who doesn't enjoy Angels in the Outfield? I did the arm flappy thing for people who don't watch the video. Moving on from there, The Irregulars is showing up on Netflix also today. As I said, today, man, everything's today. The Irregulars, I don't know much about it. And the synopsis, like if you were to listen to me explain what it's about, you'd probably be as uninterested in it as I am. It's like there's a bunch of kids and they're working with Sherlock Holmes to solve paranormal crimes and stop the end of the world in Victorian England. I guess is what I got from the trailer. And the trailer actually looks surprisingly good. That's why it's so high on this list because I would have otherwise not given any slightest bit of a care. And since it's Netflix, they probably released the whole season at once, and I will not likely check it out for a very long time now. But I was impressed by the trailer, and I thought it actually looked kind of better than the synopsis for it has any right to be. So it's at least worth maybe checking out if that's something you're interested in. That's The Regulars on Netflix, and that came out today. Moving on from there to number 5, Doom 3 VR edition comes out on PSVR. I didn't say when, but I think that was, I can't remember when. You know what? Fuck it. I'll find that out, and we'll make the fix, and the world will thank me. I'll be like a superhero. It is coming out on March 29th. What is the 29th? Is that Monday? Monday, gotta get down on Monday. Everybody's looking forward to Doom 3 VR. Monday, getting down on Monday. Save. All right, there we have successfully edited the Geekly Weekly and entertained you with a good song. Moving on, Doom 3 VR it looks really cool. I've never actually played Doom 3 before. I think I mentioned that last week when I was talking about Bethesda. But I was always impressed by Doom 3. I think I played the demo back in the day when it would barely run on my computer. I seem to remember Doom 3 is one of those movies, like I don't know if you ever remember when Crysis came out, but Crysis was not movies, but games. When Crysis came out, Crysis was one of those video games where a lot of the talk around the game, like a lot of the reviews and press leading up to it, would talk about how, oh, there's no consumer grade computer that can run this game at full resolution and full graphics. It looks so good, and it's so, like, the engine is so powerful that you need the most insane computer to run it that doesn't even exist yet. And Doom 3 was kind of the same sort of thing, where it was like people reviewing the game, people who had these top of the line computers are still like, well, I can't run it at max resolution. I gotta turn off all these settings if I want it to run. But when it runs at max and the shadows are going and the light sources are going, it looks fucking fantastic. The textures are like what we had never seen before at that time. Nowadays, does it still hold up? I think surprisingly well, considering how long ago it was made. But definitely doesn't look as amazing as it did back then, just because we've seen so much more since then. But it definitely pushed us in a direction that like games like Last of Us, for instance, probably owe a lot of their their lighting and shadows and such to beginner concepts that began use in Doom 3. And it was just a big push forward for video game graphics at that time period, which was a long time ago. But now, after that game has had remasters and it's come out on modern consoles, I believe, at least it was on the 360. And I've had many an opportunity to play it. I never actually played the final game, and I've always wanted to. Now it's out on VR, and that sounds like the best way to play it. From what I've heard, it's the scariest of the Doom games, most horror focused. So if that's your interest, putting on a VR helmet and just freaking the fuck out, then this might be the game for you. That's Doom 3 VR Edition coming out on Monday on PlayStation VR. Moving on from there, number 6 on the list, Supergirl Season 6, a huge week. On the CW, that comes out on Tuesday, and as you know, I'm a big fan of the CW shows. You probably can tell by the fact that I review them surprisingly favorably, even when they're perhaps not so good. I'm usually more forgiving than other people are. Supergirl, I was not a big fan of season 1 so much. I felt like it was all right. Like it got stronger as it went on, but and as I grew more attached to the characters, that helped as well, I think. But it certainly was weaker than it became when it changed in season 2. And season 2 on, it's always felt like a stronger, better show, that it has earned its place on the CW. And there's been even certain points when it was perhaps at its strongest that it was even my favorite of the CW shows. When it was stronger and other of the shows were perhaps weaker, then it actually shone brighter. I wouldn't say that's always the case, and the Supergirl certainly has its share of flaws, but it can be strong sometimes when it wants to be. So, if you've already watched it, then I'm sure you'll be there with me. And if you've already been watching, I mean, then I'm sure you'll be there with me on Tuesday. And if not, I don't know if that would be the best place to start, but I will say that John Cryer's Lex Luthor is great. I love him as Lex Luthor. He does a great job. I think I like him better as Lex Luthor than Charlie Sheen's brother in Two and a Half Men. It's weird though that now we have two Lex Luthors, because in Superman and Lois there's a different Lex Luthor who's black, and that's kind of weird. I wonder if they'll ever meet. But then again, Superman and Lois sort of seems to act as if the CW verse doesn't exist, so who knows what's up with that. Moving on from there to number 7 on the list, Monster Hunter Rise on Nintendo Switch. It comes out today, and it looks good. You can ride monsters, which is cool. I've never actually played a Monster Hunter game before. I've always wanted to. I don't think this is going to be where I start, but if you're a fan of the Monster Hunter series, I'm pretty sure you're pretty excited for this game. It's the first kind of modern Monster Hunter game to be on Switch. The last Nintendo Switch Monster Hunter game wasn't the newest game. It was actually a sort of remaster of the generation's was it a Wii U game? I can't even remember. But yeah, so people are very excited for this Monster Hunter Rise game. It looks like it's gonna be pretty good, and that could be exciting. So I might even one day check out the Monster Hunter series. I kind of want to play some of the other games and play them in order because I hear that once you play the newest game, the other ones are just not the same. So you want to, for the sake of the mechanics, once you get used to some of the ease of life changes they make in the later games, and you'll want them in the earlier games, and that the earlier games will seem crappy in comparison. So if you don't care about playing the other games in the series, by all means, start at whatever game you feel like. I hear Monster Hunter World on the main consoles was great, and I hear this game, Monster Hunter Rise, could be pretty great too on Nintendo Switch. So you could check out either one and enjoy yourself probably. Moving on from there to number 8 on the list, The Vault. I had never heard of this movie before, but I checked out the trailer and it seemed not that bad. So if that's what you're interested in, I don't know where it is. It says it's going to be in theaters. It could also be elsewhere. I think in Canada it might be available on Amazon, but I don't know where it's going to be for other people. So apparently it was made in corroboration with Netflix, but Netflix doesn't currently have it but they might get it later. Who knows? But the trailer didn't look bad, and if you're interested in that sort of thing, it has it has the guy from Game of Thrones, the Onion Knight, as like the dude running the team who are going to steal from this vault, and then there's like a kid as well in the vault. I don't know, it's weird. But you can watch it, and it doesn't look that bad. So there you go. Or else it wouldn't have even made the list. Number 9 on the list, Space-Based Startopia, coming out on PC and consoles today. This is looks like it's a remake of a game I used to love back in the day. Sort of like Doom 3. It's a game where I played the demo and I love the demo to shit, and I never actually got to play the actual game, and it always was disappointing to me. But now they are remaking it on PC and consoles called Space-Based Startopia instead of before it was just called Startopia. And I it looks fine. It doesn't look great. I think I'm more interested in it just because of the nostalgia. But you could always check it out and see if it's something that's up your alley. It's sort of like SimCity, but on a space station. And so you're dealing with like random aliens coming in and be like, Blorg, I like to eat blorg blorg. So I hope there's restaurants here that serve blorgy blorg. And then you're gonna be like, shit, I better make a restaurant that serves blorgy blorg. And then some other alien will be like, man, I hate the people who eat blargy blargs. Blargy blarg smells gross. I hope my house isn't beside the blargy blarg factory. And it's like, oh shit, I gotta move his house now. And weird stuff like that. So that probably doesn't sound pretty great. But as a kid, I used to think it was hilarious. Moving on from there, number 10 on the list, Bad Trip on Netflix comes out today. That what was interesting about that, and again, and it's something else I've never heard of before. It was I think it's a movie, and I think it looks like they're telling a story, and I guess there was a partial script maybe, but then also at the same time they're doing things just like in real places with real people, just hanging out and reacting to these weird things that are happening in this scripted movie. So you've got like, like he's got to go on this road trip for this story reason, but then while he's at the gas station, some crazy hijinks happen, and Mr. Bean type things, or Funny or Die type, uh, you know, or Borat type things happen, and then people are like, "What the fuck's going on? This is crazy!" And then it's like, "Haha, people are reacting to this crazy thing happening." Anyway, back to the story we were telling. Like I have no idea what this is. It's ridiculous. But that looks different, so you might want to check that out. That's on Netflix today, called Bad Trip. With what's the name of that guy who is Bad Trip Netflix. The name of the guy I'm thinking of, Eric Andre. That's right. That's the guy who's doing all the city crazy things in this city crazy movie. So yes, Bad Trip, Netflix is the 10th thing. Honorable mentions. This is a new segment that I'm attaching to the Geekly predictions. The honorable mentions for the Geekly predictions can include things like the Falcon and Winter Soldier continuing. It's not going to make the list because it made the list last week and has now premiered. But I still believe that the second episode coming out is a big deal. It's somewhat of an event thing going, so it's worth bringing up. And so the Falcon and Winter Soldier, it continues to release, and that's exciting. Also, another honorable mention: Saturday Night Live returns. I don't think it's been that long since it last aired, so I'm not going to put that on the list. But it's still pretty exciting that comes back, and you might want to know that Saturday Night Live is returning this weekend. Finally, Q Into the Storm continues. I never added this on the list. I didn't think anything big of it. I'm not reviewing it either or anything, and it's not getting on the TV rankings, mainly because I don't include nonfiction things on the TV rankings. Otherwise, I would have to include Colbert and The Daily Show and Vice News, and it's like, how do I compare news to? So I'm not doing that. So Q Into the Storm isn't going to make the list. That said, I accidentally caught the halfway through the first episode, and then watched the whole of that first episode, well, the whole second half of that first episode, and then all of the second episode. And I'm looking forward to the third episode now because it's hooked me pretty securely. I can't wait to see where it goes from there. So if you're sort of interested in learning more about Q, there's plenty more episodes of that coming, and you can always rewatch the first two episodes. They're all over the place. HBO keeps replaying them, and they're also on streaming all over the place as well. So that's Q Into the Storm. It is a documentary about them trying to figure out who is Q, and like kind of delving into the history of Q. Moving on from there to the Geekly Weekly news headlines. We are at 3 p.m., so we've got about 40 minutes, and then I'm going to have to cut us off, so we're going to have to be quick about this. Starting at the top,
Activision Blizzard CEO criticized for getting $200 million during the layoffs. Let's hear a bit more about this. This is a story on Screen Rant by Olivia Harris, published March 18th, 2021. Following the news of Activision Blizzard laying off a large number of employees last week, it has been revealed that the CEO, Bobby Kotick, is set to receive a payout of nearly $200 million in 2021, which is insane. That is an insane amount of money for one person to have. And that's in 1 year. Insane. While nearly 190 Activision Blizzard employees were let go, being given, in addition to a generous severance package, a $200 in Battle.net gift cards as farewell. It seems that because, that way they can keep playing their World of Warcraft even when they don't work at Blizzard. I'm sure they'll can't wait for that. It seems that the company is doing well enough to take care of its executives. Activision Blizzard is known for some of the biggest gaming titles in the industry. The massively successful Call of Duty franchise and World of Warcraft MMORPG are just two of the company's most popular IPs. I could keep reading this, but I think the point that I'm getting at is what drives me repeatedly frustrated. What keeps frustrating me repeatedly is the fact that you have these companies and businesses and these super rich people complain about how they're hurting while they continue to make these record profits, and while the only people that actually get hurt are the poor and the poverty stricken and the suffering, and those are the people that get hurt again and again and again, and nobody ever cares about them, and they just continue to get hurt more while the people at the top continue to make more and more money. Even the companies that are hurting, somehow the people who run this shit, like the Donald Trumps of the world, they win. Either they win or whether they win or lose. Like, even when they lose, it's because they found ways to twist the game and still make millions off of it. So it's like, shit, my business venture failed. I don't get to make tens of millions. I'll just make millions. Is what these people often have to do, are dealing with. And it's so frustrating and it's so ridiculous, and honestly is 100% why I believe there should be a universal basic income. People should not have to worry about things like surviving and living, especially when other people get to make $200 million in a year while laying off a bunch of employees and not trickling down that money. That money's not getting passed around. It's not helping the economy. It's just going into one guy's bank account so he can fucking be rich and have another yacht and live in another mansion. And what did he do to earn that money, huh? He made some choices sitting at a desk while other people did all the work and earned him all that money. Like, it's so frustrating. But moving on from there. Very angry Democrats face tough choices on immigration. This is a story by Will Weissert of the Associated Press on March 19th, 2021. Out of Washington. Democrats who long blistered the Trump administration's hardline immigration policies are suddenly in a tough political bind. The Biden administration is responding to a wave of children crossing the southern border into the U.S. with some of the very tactics that evoked moral outrage from Democrats when former President Donald Trump embraced them. That includes accommodating children in hastily improvised lockups, spurring Republicans to argue that Democrats are now the ones throwing kids in cages. The moment leaves many Democrats with few good options. There's little appetite to condemn President Joe Biden in the same terms as Trump. Biden, after all, is pushing for a massive immigration overhaul that includes prized goals such as a pathway to citizenship for millions, and has spoken of the need to treat those entering the U.S. with compassion. But in taking a softer stance, Democrats and immigration advocates also risk being branded by the GOP as hypocrites. I have chosen to not allow myself to get into my feelings about how there are still these detention centers being popped up by this administration because it makes me very, very angry, said Amanda Elise Salas, a Democratic political operative in Texas, Rio Grande Valley, who worked for Biden's presidential campaign. Salas said that she understands that change comes in increments, and that Democrats don't have enough congressional seats to make Biden's immigration agenda an immediate reality. But she added it doesn't make any sense how we aren't looking at this in a radical way. Trump expanded and fortified border walls while championing zero-tolerance policies that made it more difficult to seek U.S. asylum and briefly even separated immigrant parents and children. Biden has used executive actions to begin rolling back much of that. So for people who are arguing that he's not doing anything and that we're just as bad as Republicans, let's just hold on.
Biden has used executive actions to begin rolling back much of that, but a sweeping plan he announced his first day in office to remake the immigration system has stalled in Congress. Instead, the Democratic controlled House passed two smaller scale bills Thursday that offer a process to obtain U.S. citizenship for immigrants brought to the country illegally as children and extend legal status to farm workers and their families. Both initiatives won some GOP support, helping their chances in the Senate split 50-50. But Republicans have also signaled that they see continuing to hammer Biden on border issues as a winner heading into 2022's midterm elections. The number of immigrants being stopped at the U.S. southern border surged to nearly 100,000 in February alone. Enough of those children were without their parents that the Biden administration has reopened a Trump administration facility in remote Carrizo Springs, Texas, to house them. So, for the record, we're not taking those kids from their parents. The parents are sending the kids without the parents. Officials are also planning to send more hundreds of miles north to converted space inside Dallas's convention center. So they're going to send some of those kids away from the border to a better facility that might be more, might be less of a jail. Biden defenders note that what's happening on the border now is not the same as during Trump's years. Their criticisms of the Trump administration focus on children separated from their parents and held in border patrol facilities featuring cells partitioned with chain link fences. Further, the Biden administration continues to rapidly send back most single adults and families whom federal agents stop at the border under a public health order issued by Trump at the start of the coronavirus pandemic. It only is allowing teens and children on their own to stay, at least temporarily, which has helped cause their ranks to spike. Still, such nuance is easily lost in the larger political fight, and Republicans looking to hit back after Biden successfully delivered on his promised $1.9 trillion coronavirus relief package have been quick to pounce. This is a human heartbreak, California Representative Kevin McCarthy, the top Republican of the House, said after touring a border facility in El Paso, Texas. What a fucking hypocrite! You didn't bother touring any of those border facilities when there were hundreds of them by Trump, but now you're gonna tour them and make it all out into this big event, and which goes to show that even the top Republican of the House, Kevin McCarthy, the guy who passed judgment on Melissa Taylor Greene and said, I think she's okay. It's obvious to see that he's part of the whole agenda. He's part of this whole lie to everybody, propaganda is the way, fake it till you make it, as long as we can say whatever we want and make it true. This crisis is created by the presidential policies of this new administration. Shut the fuck up, Kevin McCarthy. Texas Senator Ted Cruz, who is organizing his own border trip. See, they're all making shows of this. They're all making this out as if it's some big media event, but they don't actually give a shit about the kids. He said Ted Cruz says that the Biden administration, in effect, issued an invitation for unaccompanied children to come to this country. We didn't ask for it. In fact, Biden said, please don't come. Democrats countered by alleging the actual hypocrisy among Republicans, as I mentioned, who are now feigning concern over immigrant children after years of cheering tougher Trump policies. They say part of the surge has been caused by immigrants who were stuck at the border waiting to advance legitimate asylum claims the Trump administration failed to process. They're having to pick up the pieces of a system in tatters because of Donald Trump, former Democratic presidential candidate Julian Castro said of the Biden administration. Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas has bristled at suggestions that the southern border is in crisis, and White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki has tried to avoid using the term, but it is kind of a crisis. And Biden has said, don't leave your town and city. The reality is that people, including women and children, are forced to migrate and have been coming seasonally, says Marilena Hincapi, executive director of the National Immigration Law Center. It isn't likely they started coming now because Biden got elected. They come every year around this time when the weather patterns change. Hincapi applauded the Biden administration's use of federal emergency management agency officials to manage the influx of immigrants in more humane, healthy ways. But for Salas, Biden's comments reflected a misunderstanding of life on the U.S.-Mexico border that encompasses most members of both parties. We're not focused on the right things, she said. Indeed, the Biden administration has admitted struggling with sending mixed messages to immigrants. It's difficult at times to convey both hope in the future and the danger that is now. Roberta Jacobson, the Biden administration's coordinator for the southern border, said during a White House press briefing last week, we are trying to convey to everybody in the region that we will have legal processes for people in the future, and we're standing those up as soon as we can. But at the same time, you cannot come through irregular means. The majority of people will be sent out of the United States. So, despite Republican criticisms, the truth is, of course, usually in the middle. Moving on from there. An all hands moment. GOP rallies behind voting limits. This one's annoying. This is a story by Nicholas Riccardi and Michael Bisecker of the Associated Press, March 19th, 2021. On an invitation-only call last week, Senator Ted Cruz huddled with Republican state lawmakers to call them to battle on the issue of voting rights. Democrats are trying to expand voting rights to illegal aliens and child molesters, he claimed, and Republicans must do all that they can to stop them. If they push through far-reaching election legislation now before the Senate, the GOP won't win elections again for generations. That's right. The more we allow everyone a vote, the more the GOP are afraid they're not going to win any more elections, and they think that the problem is stopping those people from voting, not changing themselves to be more likable. Asked if there was room to compromise, Cruz was blunt. No. H.R. 1's only objective is to ensure that Democrats can never again lose another election, that they will win and maintain control of the House of Representatives and the Senate and of the state legislatures for the next century, Cruz told the group organized by the American Legislative Exchange Council, a corporate-backed conservative group that provides model legislation to state legislatures. Yes, Cruz is realizing that the country has turned against conservatives, so he thinks that they need to find a way to cheat to fix the system. And that's exactly what this is pretty much saying without even trying to hide it, which is absurd. Cruz's statements, recorded by a person on the call and obtained by the Associated Press, captured the building intensity behind Republicans' nationwide campaign to restrict access to the ballot. From state houses to Washington, the fight over who can vote and how, often cast as voting integrity, has galvanized the Republican Party in search of unifying mission in the post-Trump era. But they're not the bad guys. They insist they're not villains. For a powerful network of conservatives, voting restrictions are now viewed as a political life-or-death debate, and the fight has all but eclipsed traditional Republican issues like abortion, gun rights, and tax cuts as an organizing tool. That potency is drawing influential figures and money from across the right, ensuring that the clash over the legislation in Washington will be partisan and expensive. It kind of feels like an all-hands-on-deck moment for the conservative movement, when the movement writ large realizes the sanctity of our elections is paramount and voter distress is at an all-time high. So Jessica Anderson, Executive Director of Heritage Action, blah, 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 blah. They just keep trying, blah, blah. Republicans contend it's a grab bag of long-sought Democratic goals, H.R. 1 I'm assuming they're talking about, aimed at tilting elections in their favor. Cruz claimed it would, but aren't the elections already tilted in their favor? It will lead to voting by millions of criminals and illegal aliens. What a bunch of bullshit. The bill says America would be better off if more murderers were voting. America would be better off if more rapists and child molesters were voting, Cruz said. He added that he had recently participated in an all-day strategy call with national conservative leaders to coordinate opposition. The leaders agreed that Republicans would seek to rebrand Democratic-backed bill as the Corrupt Politicians Act, he said. The focus on voting is visible across the conservative movement, even among groups with no clear interest in the voting debate. A televised town hall in February, leading Christian conservative Tony Perkins fielded several questions about voting before tackling topics on social issues his Family Research Council typically focuses on. Perkins answered the question by recalling how voting laws were made stricter in his native Louisiana after a close 1996 Senate race won by Democrats. He noted that the state now votes solidly Republican. And they say that like it's a good thing? Well, turns out that when we allow everyone to vote, they vote Democrat. But if we stricten up the laws so that only Republicans are allowed to vote, then we'll win. And that's a win for us, is what this guy is saying. When you have free, fair elections, you're going to have outcomes that are positive, Perkins said before urging viewers to push state lawmakers to restore election integrities. Yeah, and we did have an outcome that was positive in 1996 when we had a free and fair election. But then they made it strict, now it's not free and fair. Stronger voting regulations have long been a conservative goal, driven by old, and some say outdated conventional wisdom that Republicans thrive in elections with lower turnout, and Democrats in ones with more voters.
That has translated to GOP efforts to tighten voter identification laws and require more frequent voter roll purges. Both efforts tend to disproportionately exclude Black and Latino voters, groups that lean Democratic. In a sign of the increasing attention to the issue last year, Leonard Leo, a Trump advisor and one of the strategists behind the conservative focus on the federal judiciary, formed the Honest Elections Project to push for voting restrictions and coordinate GOP effort to monitor the 2020 election, or the 2020 vote. But the issue expanded beyond what many conservatives expected, as Trump groundlessly blamed fraud for his loss, and he and his allies lost more than 50 court cases trying to overturn the election. His conservative base began convinced of vague irregularities and holes in the voting system. While Leo's group, like other parts of the establishment GOP, kept a distance from such claims, state lawmakers stepped in quickly with bills aimed at fixing phantom problems and restoring confidence in the system. We're certain our vote will count. We're certain our vote is secure. We're certain our system is fair and not having any sort of nefarious activities, said Iowa Representative Bobby Kaufman, a Republican who authored a wide-ranging election bill that shortened the state's early voting period. Then why are you doing that? Leo's group has since released a list of its preferred voting law changes. Similarly, other outside groups soon jumped into the debate that's roiling with their activists who write the letters, make phone calls, and send small donations that keep the groups relevant. It's gone up the chain of priorities, said Noah Wall, Executive Vice President of Freedom Works, which trained 60 top activists in Orlando last week on voting issues. If you were to poll activists right now, election integrity is going to be near the top of the list. 12 months ago, that wasn't the case. Yeah, because you guys made it that way. You guys keep yelling about it and making fake fucking bullshit. What a bunch of fake fucking bullshit. Moving on from there. Strong earthquake shakes Japan. USGS is 7.2. That's really all you have to know. This is by the Associated Press on March 20th. Japan on Saturday experienced a strong earthquake that shook buildings in the capital, Tokyo, and triggered a tsunami warning for the country's northeast coast. The U.S. Geological Survey put the strength at magnitude of 7.2. It was estimated that the quake centered 34 kilometers east of Ishinomaki at a depth of 60 kilometers. The Kyoto News Agency said its epicenter was off the coast of Miyagi Prefecture, which was heavily damaged during the huge earthquake and tsunami in 2011. The tsunami warning was issued for Miyagi Prefecture, but I guess it never happened. The shaking it started just before 6:10 p.m. That's all we need to know about that. Moving on. Meteor strikes over Cuba, causes explosion. I feel like that's also pretty self-explanatory. Also by the Associated Press on March 20th. What is believed to be a meteor lit the sky over eastern Cuba and caused an explosion, scientists on the island said Saturday. There are no reports of damage or injury. Head of the National Seismological Service, Enrique Arango Arias, told the official Cuba debate news site that the phenomenon was noticed in the towns of Mao, Sagua de Tanamo, and Maizi. He said the service's instruments registered the expansive wave of the explosion. Social media users reported seeing red or white light, followed by an explosion at about 10:06 p.m. local time Friday. Moving on from there. Photos of Australia's disastrous 1-in-100-year floods. Let's check that out. So this is another thing that, like those other two stories, I haven't seen too much focus on other news sources. This is a story on Vice, and that's one of the pictures. Looks like a lot of water. Those are trees. Historic floods are sweeping Australia's eastern state of New South Wales, forcing dams to spill over, rivers to burst their banks, and thousands of people to evacuate. In parts of western Sydney, Hawkesbury, Nepean River... Why do they make all their names so long? The flooding has reached levels not seen since 1961, according to the Bureau of Meteorology, and in the time since the heavy downpours began on Saturday, some 450 gigaliters, I've never even heard of that term before, gigaliters, almost as much as is contained in Sydney Harbour, has been released from the Wawagamba Dam each day. Each day! Wow. That is fucked. They're really flooding in Australia. Authorities have declared the extreme weather event, which is expected to continue over the coming days, a natural disaster. More than 1,000 people have been rescued, and more than 18,000 have been evacuated, according to ABC, some 15,000 of whom were from the state's mid-north coast. This is in Australia. Many of those areas currently being inundated by the record-breaking floods were battling some of the most devastating bushfires Australia had ever seen just over a year ago. Swaths of bushland and grazing country that were scorched black by the blazes are now underwater, rendered swampland by the ongoing downpours. Wow.
Most of the low-lying areas we saw water. It was like an inland sea, Matt Morris, resident of Port Macquarie at the mid-north coast, told the ABC. All that area that came back down through had been hit by the fires at the beginning of the year. Some areas around Port Macquarie had seen almost 900 millimeters of rain in the past 6 days. NSW Premier Gladys Berejiklian meanwhile described the floods as a 1 in 100-year event and noted that the state was experiencing a deep-seated extreme weather event. Wow, look at that. That's right up to her like front step. And she's like, and then like you can see where like the fence is. So like, wow. Wow. It's gotta be down like there. Some communities that were battered by the bushfires are now being battered by the floods and deep drought prior to that. That's insane. They went from bushfires to deep drought to floods. Berejiklian told media on Monday, I don't know any time in our state's history where we have had these extreme weather conditions in such quick succession in the middle of a pandemic. Surreal scenes from the front lines of the disaster zones emerged over the weekend as the floods continued to escalate, including cows washing up in people's backyards. Wow. A family's house that was overrun by an infestation of spiders. Wow. And a 3-bedroom cottage that was filmed floating downstream, carried away by the torrents. That's a house? Wow. Wow. It literally floated like a houseboat. The whole house, fully intact. Peter Bowie, the owner of the property, told the ABC. It went so fast. It went nearly a kilometer, all intact, 100%. Wow. This house just lifted up and floated down the river. Wow. The Insurance Council of Australia declared a catastrophe for large parts of NSW on Monday, revealing that it received more than 5,000 damage claims over the past few days as a result of widespread storms and floods. Claims from affected people and businesses will be fast-tracked as a result. Berejiklian announced that she has had conversations with the Prime Minister about getting assistance from the Australian Defence Force for flood cleanup across NSW. It is an evolving situation. If we need their support, we will ask for it, she said. My suspicion is we will, given the extent of the recovery. No shit. That's a gas station right there. Flooded. This thing is still playing with stop that. Berejiklian announced that she has had conversations with the Prime Minister about getting assistance from the Australian Defence Force for flood cleanup across NSW. I've already said that, haven't I? All right, moving on to more pictures. Wow, 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 wow. All right, anyway, the time is 3:25. We got this. Maybe. Second Canadian to go on trial in China on spying charges. This is frustrating. Apparently doesn't exist anymore. All right, I guess we'll never know about that article. That's disappointing. I wonder why that is. Because that was a disturbing article. Moving on. Myanmar frees detained BBC journalists as protests continue. That exists. Myanmar frees detained BBC journalists as protests continue. This is a story by the Associated Press on March 22nd, 2021. Out of Yangon, Myanmar. The BBC said Monday that a journalist from its Burmese language service was released by authorities in Myanmar but gave no details as protesters in the Southeast Asian nation continued their broad civil disobedience movement against last month's military coup. The journalist Aung Thura was detained on March 19th by men who appeared to be plainclothes security agents while reporting outside a court in the capital of Naypyidaw. Arrests of media workers have been part of junta's intensifying efforts to choke off misinformation about resistance to choke off real information about resistance to the February 1st coup. Some 40 journalists have been arrested. 40 journalists have been arrested since the coup, half of whom are still in detention, including Thin Zhao of the Associated Press, according to the Myanmar-based Assistance Association for Political Prisoners. On Monday, lawmakers from the Association of Southeast Asian Nations urged regional leaders to meet and devise a strong and decisive response to increased violence against protesters by Myanmar's military. The lawmakers urged the 10-nation bloc to send a delegation alongside the UN Special Envoy to Myanmar to help negotiate a democratic and human rights-based solution. The ASEAN has a policy of non-interference in each other's affairs, but some regional leaders have rebuked the violence and urged restraint in Myanmar. That's the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, by the way, the ASEAN. The Myanmar army is killing people every day. Statements are welcome, but are useless against military's bullets, said Charles Santiago, a Malaysian lawmaker who heads the ASEAN Parliamentarians for Human Rights group. Since the military seized power, many citizens, from teachers to doctors, traders, and railway workers, have joined a civil disobedience movement that uses widespread boycotts, strikes, and other actions in an attempt to force a return to civilian government. The junta has responded with an increasingly brutal crackdown and sought to limit information reaching the outside world. Security forces have opened fire on crowds and killed hundreds. Internet access has been severely restricted, private newspapers have been barred from publishing, and protesters, journalists, and politicians have been arrested in large numbers. Protesters on Monday sent hundreds of red balloons into the air in Myanmar's biggest city, Yangon, in support of civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi, who was ousted in the coup and detained. Many also wore red shirts, the color of the National League of Democracy Party. Protesters have called for foreign intervention to aid them under the Doctrine of Responsibility to Protect, also known as R2P, devised to deal with matters of genocide, war crimes, ethnic cleansing, and crimes against humanity. Attached to the balloons are papers with R2P written on them. Angry citizens also marched and chanted slogans in early morning demonstrations. Well, I don't understand why the UN isn't dealing with this then. That should be everything the UN needs. The people are crying for them to act, and they are sitting there doing nothing. What the fuck? It is said that 2,665 people have also been arrested or charged since. Oh, let's start a bit higher on this. The Assistance Association of Political Prisoners has verified 250 deaths nationwide. 250 deaths nationwide, but says the actual total, including cases where verification has been difficult, is probably much higher. It said that 2,665 people have also been arrested or charged since the coup, with 2,290 still detained or sought for arrest. Awful. Moving on from there, Disney, Black Widow is premiering on Disney Plus in July. That's right. This is a story on Polygon by Joshua Riviera, March 23rd, 2021. And apparently, it's going to air on July 9th, 2021. It was originally scheduled for May 1st, 2021 in theaters, but was delayed until. No, it was originally scheduled for May 1st, 2020, but was initially delayed until November 6th, 2020, then briefly held a May 7th, 2021 date, as movie studios gauge whether audiences would return to theaters as COVID-19 cases declined and vaccine availability increased. The answer, it seems, is not yet. The film will be available on Disney Plus's $30 Premier Access program, much like Raya and the Last Dragon and Mulan. The news comes shortly after Disney announced the first episode of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier was Disney Plus's most watched premiere, topping WandaVision and The Mandalorian before it. The company cited no numbers in its announcement, but it does reinforce the not at all outlandish notion that the majority of the service's staggering 100 million subscribers will happily stream the latest Marvel Cinematic Universe entry and perhaps even pay the $30 Premier Access fee for a theatrical release. I have not been willing to do that for any of the movies so far. Like, I wasn't willing to do that for Raya and the Last Dragon, and I wasn't willing to pay $30 for Mulan either. However, I almost feel like I'm almost tempted. Even though that $30 seems like so much money. But on the other hand, I've been waiting so long for Black Widow. And to watch it in 4K with HDR on Disney Plus seems like a good reason to pay $30. That might be the one that finally gets me, and I hate to do it because I would hate to see Disney react with, "Oh, we should do that for all our things now." That would suck. But I don't know. Let's see. Whatever. Moving on. He allegedly raped a teen girl and lived under her bed. Oh my god. That needs a little bit more of a transition, I believe. All right, if you get triggered by stories of rape, might I suggest not tuning in for this next article. Just skip ahead about 5 minutes, and we'll be done with this. Okay. He allegedly raped a teen girl and lived under her bed for 3 weeks. This is a story by Carter Sherman on Vice.com, March 24th, 2021. Oh, Lord, time's run out. In the latest gruesome dispatch from rape culture, an Ohio man, this man, I guess, his mustache makes it worse. In the latest gruesome dispatch from rape culture, an Ohio man stands accused of raping and taking nude photos of a teen girl whose bed he'd been living under for 3 weeks. Before slithering under her bed, prosecutors say that Jarrett Wright, 20, first met the underage girl on Instagram. Authorities didn't disclose the girl's name or exact age, but she's between 13 and 18 years old, the Akron Beacon Journal reported, citing the local prosecutor's office. The teen knew he was under her bed. He allegedly held her down and forced her into sexual activity. But her mother, who ultimately discovered Wright, had no idea, according to the Akron Beacon Journal. It's unclear if Wright even left the house during the 3 weeks he spent hiding under the bed. Now Wright is facing 3 counts of rape and 1 count of producing child pornography. His bond was set to $50,000. How long did they say? 3 weeks or something like that? 3 weeks. What the fuck? His bond was set to $50,000. $50,000, only $50,000 for that. The Hamilton County, that was in Hamilton? That was in Hamilton? Hard to say. The Hamilton County Prosecutor's Office didn't immediately respond to a Vice News request for comment. Court records did not list any attorney for Wright. These details are nightmarish. No shit. But alleged... Oh, I guess Hamilton somewhere in the U.S. Okay. I'm guessing. This is a U.S. article, I think. Insane, though. These details are nightmarish, but alleged attacks like these aren't isolated events. This has happened before. What? They're emblematic of a society that regularly violently discriminates against women, and that is rotten with rape. This isn't even the first time that cops have caught an alleged assailant hiding in someone's bedroom recently. What? In 2020, a man was arrested in Washington state for repeatedly sexually abusing a 12-year-old. He'd kept himself hidden under her bed and in her closet. Oh my God. That same year, a 36-year-old man in Florida was arrested for hiding in an underage girl's bedroom for more than a month. What? Older than me. The U.S. is shot through with sexual assault. More specifically, every year, nearly 500,000 people aged 12 and up are sexually assaulted, according to RAINN, the preeminent organization fighting sexual violence in the U.S. Hi, my nose always so itchy. And I'm reading. 1 in every 6 American women will confront an attempted or completed rape at some point in her life. 1 in every 33 men will experience the same. Trans and non-binary people face particularly high risks of sexual violence. Almost half of all trans people have been sexually assaulted, according to the National Sexual Violence Resource Center. These statistics are all a function of what's known as rape culture, a society where sexual violence... That's fucked. Sorry, I was just jumping back on that. 1 in 6 American women and 1 in every 33 men. And trans and non-binary people are even higher, almost half, 50%. And on top of all of that, I want to add my stats because I have talked to a lot of women in my time who have very similar stories. I'm a guy who I've in the past recently talked about my issues with making relationships or whatever, or even like being social with people at all. So these words might be like, what? But it wasn't always this way. I keep pointing out that for the past 6 years, I've had an impossible time where it seems like everybody treats nerds like they're incels, whether or not they are. And it sucks. And that's what I've been experiencing for a long time now. But it wasn't always like that. Incels didn't even always used to exist. And I used to have actually a very healthy sex life. And I would meet a lot of women who would open up to me and see me as a person who was someone they could open up to. And so I would hear a lot of stories of women who would tell me things that they wouldn't normally tell people. And they would even say that, like, this is something I don't tell people, but like, I'm going to tell you because you've convinced me. You know, like usually I'll be like, because they know I'm a writer and they know that I have an interest in, you know, like the experiences they've had. So people wanted to open up to me. And so I've had so many people, everyone who has ever opened up to, I would say almost every woman who has ever opened up to me has had a story, some horror story that they just don't tell people. And I mean, to say that 1 in 6 women will confront an attempted or completed rape at some point in their lifetime, I think that's saying like, and will then report it. Because I think that none unreported, I think it goes much higher, and could even be like 60 or 70% or something insane like that. Like I'm not even kidding right now. It's everyone has a horror story that they can give, and it's fucked. And the world is fucked if that's true, you know? These statistics are all a function of what's known as rape culture, a society where sexual violence is treated as normal and acceptable, where the onus to prevent it is placed on the shoulders of victims, and where assailants are rarely held accountable. For every 1,000 sexual assaults, Rain estimates that 995 of attackers will evade imprisonment. Men learn to regard rape as a moment in time, a discrete episode with a beginning, middle, and end. Activist Soraya Shamali wrote in her 2018 book, Rage Becomes Her. But for women, rape is thousands of moments that we fold into ourselves over a lifetime. Rape culture teaches us to expect men to become real-life monsters under our beds. It teaches, which apparently is real. It teaches victims that they should defend themselves rather than asking perpetrators to say not lurk under beds. And it blinds us from asking why exactly stories like this are so common and what we can do about them. Horrifying. Horrifying, horrifying, horrifying. Makes it really hard to move on to this next thing. But I do feel like this is kind of an interesting article. So, new Justice League viewing figures. Only 1/3 finished the Snyder Cut. Zack Snyder's Justice League's viewing figures look impressive, but third-party analytics revealed just a third of viewers finished the film, says Thomas Bacon, published 2 days ago on ScreenRant.com. 1.8 million households watched Zack Snyder's Justice League in its opening weekend in the US, which is in itself surprising to me. I would have expected that number to be much higher considering how we've all been acting like, you know, the whole world has embraced this movie. And it's like, well, the whole world is not 1.8 million households. Sorry to say. But it goes even further than that because only 1/3 of those viewers actually finished the film. That's right. That's 0.6 million. That's 0.6 million people actually. So 600,000 people. Only 600,000 people in the world have actually watched Zack Snyder's Justice League, and therefore only that many people can actually be like excited about this whole thing. I mean, it's grown since then. I think surely recently it's been pointed out that there's a petition going around that's hit 1 million things asking for the Snyderverse. So yeah, it's about 1 million people that are all just in this echo chamber screaming at each other like, "We're the world, and we want more Snyder Cut." And then WB's looking at it, being like, "Yeah, nah." And everybody's like, "What? But we're the world, and you're literally taking something that everyone loves, and you're shitting on it." And it's like, well, sorry to say, but 1 million people is not everyone. But then the numbers are interesting further from there because apparently, Wonder Woman only got 2.2 million on its opening weekend. So Zack Snyder's Justice League didn't even beat Wonder Woman 1984. There's another warning thing. But then it gets even more interesting from there because apparently Falcon and the Winter Soldier wasn't much better even than that. I believe Falcon and the Winter Soldier was something like I thought it said somewhere here. Where's the stats about Falcon and the Winter Soldier? Because now that's what I'm interested in. It just says that it says that Zack Snyder's Justice League outperformed the Falcon and the Winter Soldier in viewership. That's right. Apparently, Falcon and the Winter Soldier got Wonder Woman 1984. We're trying to put all this together. It's a lot of different numbers, but we can do this. Wonder Woman 1984 got 2.2 million views, which is apparently not bad, but still seems low, right? Opening weekend only, but okay. Then Snyder Cut got 1.8 million views, which also still seems low considering how much everybody's been freaking out over it. Finally, and again, only 1/3 of that actually finish the movie, which is insane. Finally, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier only got 1.7 million household views. And Disney, I'm pretty sure, announced that The Falcon and the Winter Soldier did better than WandaVision, which leads you to, in fact, apparently it's the best premiere they've had on their system, I believe is what they said, which is crazy to me because they've announced in the past that they have 100 million subscribers on their network. So you're telling me that out of 100 million subscribers, only 2% of those people actually give a shit about the most recent Marvel thing? I would think that would be like 70%. I would think like 70 million people are tuning in to watch these things. I mean, people are pointing out that I thought the $100 million number was American only, which America has 300 million people, so that would be literally 1/3 of everyone in America. But that's not so completely unbelievable to me because of how popular Star Wars and Disney is, how popular all the things on Disney is, how far it's being pushed, and how cheap it is. It's only $8 or something. And people can watch it on anything, whether it be a phone or a screen. So I mean, the idea that a lot of people jumped on free things or whatever, and got like a cheap subscription. I mean, they might cancel soon, you know. So I mean, I almost believe that 100 million was America only. So maybe 100 million isn't. Maybe 100 million is worldwide, and maybe the 1.8 million is just in America. But it feels a lot smaller than it should be for people to be like, for it to justify WB making a $200 million sequel, you know? I don't think that's the breakout success everybody's making it out to be. People are calling me crazy and a troll for saying that on Twitter, but you gotta look at the numbers. Moving on from there, it's 3:43. I really need to wrap this up, so we'll try to make these last ones fast. Amazon denies workers pee in bottles. Here are the pee bottles. So basically, Amazon is doing this thing that a lot of companies have been doing lately, gaslighting people, saying that what is happening isn't happening. So there's picture evidence. It's gross. I don't need to see that. But apparently there's more. There's their pee bottle that they hide there, and they use a Pringles can. Oh my god, this is gross. This is so gross. So gross. Wow. Ew. Ew. People that leave piss bottles or cups in their trucks and just leave them there for the next driver to find them should be fired immediately. I personally have got in my truck to find a McDonald's piss cup in the fucking cup holder. Oh, that sounds gross. Oh, makes you not want to order from Amazon anymore. Oh, that's gross. Oh, that's gross. So why is this happening? I feel like I need to read this now. That needs more information. Amazon's PR team is beefing with the Wisconsin congressman about the company's labor conditions, among them whether its workers pee in bottles. On Wednesday evening, Wisconsin, oh, that looks so gross. Wisconsin Representative Mark Pocan called out the tech behemoth for its well-documented labor abuses in a tweet. Paying workers $15 an hour doesn't make you a progressive workplace when your union busts and make workers urinate in water bottles. In response, Amazon News, the company's official news account, countered, "You don't really believe the peeing in bottles thing, do you? If that were true, nobody would work for us." They said that. But the fact that Amazon delivery drivers pee in bottles and coffee cups in their vans is not invented. It has been well documented and is a huge talking point among many delivery drivers. It is one of the most universal concerns voiced by the many Amazon delivery drivers around the country that Motherboard has interviewed. Delivery workers who drive Amazon and Blazon vans often deliver up to 300 packages a day on a 10-hour shift. That's a long shift, too. If they take too long, they can be written up and fired, so spending time locating and using a bathroom is not always an option. In fact, here's a photo of an Amazon delivery driver's pee bottles. Motherboard confirmed the driver's position and employment. We're pressured to get these routes done before nighttime, and having to find a restroom would mean driving an extra 10 minutes off path to find one, an Amazon delivery driver told Motherboard. 10 to 15 minutes to find a bathroom can add up, meaning 20 to 30 minutes there and back altogether. Obviously, we drink a lot of water throughout the day, so this is happening a lot through the drive, they continued. I can tell you that if I drove to find a restroom that I would be bringing back packages every night, and that would eventually mean I would get infractions, which would lead to terminations.
I usually do it in a bottle in the back of the van, away from many packages, and clean my hands with sanitizer because I understand how gross it is, they continued. I just park off to the side and close the front sliding door. All the guys do it, another Amazon driver in Florida who pees in coffee cups told Motherboard. The best drivers get overtime, so there's incentive to cut corners. The most productive drivers get rewarded the most hours. Peeing in bottles and bushes is a common talking point and meme in the R Amazon DSP drivers subreddit. Amazon's tweet was shared there with the title Pants on Fire. Commentators in the thread suggested that they begin to tweet photos of their pee bottles. A little over 2 weeks ago, someone on the subreddit posted a photo of a case of water bottles. Hey, at least they supply us with bathrooms, the caption read. A post from a year ago titled Y'all Really Piss in Bottles was filled with comments of people stating that they do indeed piss in bottles and garbage bags and in hedges on the side of the road. Another post was about drivers peeing in hand sanitizer canisters. There are dozens of threads and hundreds of comments about the topic on subreddit. Motherboard's previous reporting shows that Amazon has entire teams of people who monitor subreddits and Facebook pages used by their employees and contractors. That's horrible. Over the last year or so, many people have posted pictures of pee bottles, cups, etc., and they say they have left or found ew in their delivery trucks. I found piss bottles from other drivers, but now from the warehouse too. Ugh. So gross. It's clear Amazon also knows that its drivers often have nowhere to pee, which is documented in internal policies. In February, the company released a new set of disciplinary guidelines that indicates that its delivery drivers will be terminated for public urination, public defecation, and public indecency. Last night, one driver posted on Reddit about Amazon's denial that its workforce pees in bottles. We should all tweet pictures of our piss bottles to Amazon. I've peed in a Clorox wipe bottle before. Another driver posted, I had to pee in a coffee cup on a shift a couple times instead of trying to find a bathroom. Us girls can't exactly pee in a bottle. Another driver posted. Other Amazon drivers who work in rural areas find places to relieve themselves in nature. I was finding a tree every day, 3 times a day, to pee, a former Amazon delivery driver in Washington State told Motherboard. I've not seen anyone get in trouble for it, but you can get terminated. It's not just delivery drivers. In Bessemer, not having ample time to use a bathroom because of companies' productivity quotas and disciplinary system has been a key concern of unionizing workers. You're sitting there and you have to go take a piss, but you don't want to rack up time off task. Catherine Highsmith, an Amazon warehouse worker in Bessemer, Alabama, recently told Motherboard. So you're like, man, if I just hold it for another hour, I can go to the bathroom. There is that, I remember seeing a video. There's literally a video in an Amazon packing plant. I believe it's an Amazon packing plant. Oh no, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. It was even more gross than that. No, you know what I'm thinking of? And I really need to get this straight because I don't want to slander the wrong person. So it's not Amazon. I'm not talking about Amazon, but there was a meat processing plant. And I won't say who it is because I can't remember. But there was a meat processing plant that was processing pork. And there was video footage of a dude. Literally, he's processing the pork. He just kind of leans over, starts peeing like down the side of the fucking machine, and then just like puts his junk away and goes back to work on the line, just continuing to like do the pork shit. Like what? What? So gross. And who knew that factory conditions were like that? People should be allowed to go to the bathroom. That should just be something that people should be allowed to do. Moving on from there, QAnon sway canal dick ship conspiracies are getting wilder and wilder. I'm really running out of time here, so I will just say that you can read this article by going to 99geek.ca, and you can check out the Geekly Weekly and you can read the article. It's fascinating. It goes into how QAnon is creating all these conspiracy theories involving the boat being trapped in the canal. Apparently, QAnon believes that the boat contains pedophiles and children that are being transported to be pedophiliaed. And obviously that's ridiculous. But yeah, so apparently there is sex trafficking children on the boat, but that's not true. And all the evidence that they found is complete bullshit, but you can check that out by going there. One of the evidence was like, they were like, this woman is a captain of the boat, and she is clearly Monica Lewinsky. And everyone, but what they don't understand is A, the woman was not the captain of the boat. She was just a captain in Egypt of a boat. Literally just a captain in Egypt. I guess she was the first captain of a boat in Egypt because Egypt doesn't have many women boat captains. But so they thought it's because they saw her in the headlines. They're like, that's Monica Lewinsky.
or looks just like Monica Lewinsky. Therefore, this must be a boat for the child molesters. It's dumb. Anyway, moving on from there to another horrifying story. Juvenile detention center staff accused of sexually abusing kids and forcing one to drink toilet water. And see, this is real abused kids. Meanwhile, all these people are freaking out about fake abused kids, which is kind of horrifying. This is a story by Emma Ackerman on Vice.com on March 26, 2021. A deluge of horrific allegations have come out in the last few weeks against staff members at a juvenile detention center in Lima, Pennsylvania, forcing a mentally ill child to drink toilet water, leaving another covered in her own excrement for 3 days, and taking minor girls to private parties where they were sexually abused, just to detail a few. Like, what? The allegations of sexual, physical, and mental abuse against children under the care of the Delaware County Juvenile Detention Center were made public through a lawsuit filed Wednesday and a letter public defenders sent to several officials earlier this month. Allegations within the letter, which contained affidavits from current and former staff, quickly caused the facility to be emptied. Let me just quickly check someone. How am I doing for time? Concern base. Allegations in the letter, which contain, I read that. The Pennsylvania Department of Human Services also said it would investigate, according to the Philadelphia Inquirer. But the problem has been rampant in the facility, which detains children from ages 10 to 18 for more than a decade and literally spans generations, attorneys said. In one case, both the mother and daughter were allegedly harassed by guards. Other incidents allegedly took place as recently as last year. The detention center housed a total of 782 kids from 2019 to 2020, according to the lawsuit, and they were described as disproportionately children of color. The most recent allegations surfaced this week through a lawsuit brought by two people who said they were abused at the detention center in their youth. A man described in the lawsuit only as John Doe number 1 alleged that a guard anally raped him when he was 16 years old. He said he was told that he and his entire family would be killed if he informed anyone that he was raped. He was also physically abused during his time in the facility, according to the lawsuit. Ultimately, he didn't reveal that he'd been raped until 2020, almost 4 years after it allegedly occurred. Also in the lawsuit, a woman described as Jane Doe number 1 alleged that multiple guards took her to private parties when she was 16 and 17 years old, provided her with drugs including Xanax, and sexually abused her and other minor girls. A female guard was aware, but did nothing to prevent the parties, the lawsuit alleges. Jane Doe was in the facility about 6 or 7 times between approximately 2006 and 2009. Almost a decade after she was released, one guard allegedly contacted her and sent sexually explicit messages. After that, a different guard contacted her 16-year-old daughter on Instagram to say he wanted to link up, according to the lawsuit. John and Jane Doe's attorneys claim that employees of the facility were aware of or took part in the violence and neglect they experienced. Regardless of what a child has gone through and is going through, whether it's mental health issues, personal issues, whatever the reason, it's never okay to abuse a child or allow abuse of a child, or protect yourself or your reputation or your pockets at the expense of protection of kids, Brian Kent, one of the attorneys involved in the lawsuit, said. No shit. Such abuse and neglect have essentially become ingrained in juvenile detention facilities nationwide, the lawsuit alleges. More than 230 people have come forward to allege they were abused at a state-run youth detention center in New Hampshire, for instance. A 2018 survey from the Bureau of Justice Statistics, a federal agency, found that the rate of sexual victimization reported by youth in juvenile facilities had fallen to 7.1% that year compared to 9.5% in 2012. In that survey, less than 6% of kids reported sexual misconduct from staff, and just about 2% reported that misconduct involved force or coercion. However, the issue is likely underreported. Kent said Jane and John Doe hope to hold every individual and entity that had a role in their physical and sexual and emotional abuse accountable. He said attorneys on the case are already in touch with other alleged victims. Between the March 12th letter from the Delaware County Public Defender's Office and the more recent lawsuit, staff members of the Delaware County Juvenile Detention Center have now been accused of forcing a mentally ill child to drink toilet water after she attempted to suffocate herself by swallowing clothing, punching a child in the face, leaving him with a black eye, leaving a mentally ill child in seclusion and covered in her own excrement for 3 days without running water or a shower, standing by as a child screamed because she was wrapped in clothing so tightly that her face had lost color and it had to be cut away. What? Telling a child who wanted to report misconduct, did you really think a judge is going to believe a bunch of juvenile delinquents over a corrections officer? Putting the head of a child who was between the ages of 12 and 14 through a window lined with metal wire mesh during an argument.
bragging about their plans to restrain a 17-year-old pregnant girl in a way that would induce a miscarriage. Some children that were held at the facility had behavioral issues, were in trouble due to truancy, or faced delinquency proceedings, adjudication, or disposition, the juvenile equivalent of waiting to be found guilty or innocent and sentenced. The intent of the juvenile justice system isn't to punish the children like the adult process, however, but to rehabilitate them and provide care according to the lawsuit. Yet that's not always the case. No shit. And it continues to go on and on, but we don't have time anymore. So that's that. And you should check that out and read the rest of that article because it's horrifying. Moving on to the last thing, science panel. Consider air cooling tech as a climate backup. This talks about how scientists want to consider air cooling tech as a climate backup, and I think it's a good idea. Climate change is a very serious issue, and even if we make all the changes that we need to make to stop climate change, it will not solve the issue. Scientists have already shown that we are past the point of no return. Like, there is no hope for us by just making good choices. We have to make those good choices to stop it from continuing to get worse and worse and worse. And then what we need to do, because it's still going to get worse, but we can stop from accelerating. We need to stop the acceleration. And then to help us get back to something more reasonable, we then need to find more out-of-the-box solutions, such as, for instance, there's been ideas of like cooling the air or releasing something in the air that decreases the amount of sunlight that gets through, that cools the surface of the planet. These alternative scenarios are very extreme and could be dangerous, and that's why we need to put a lot of thought in them and have a lot of science involved in them, and consider all our options. But it's something we definitely need to consider because and I think that we should do it. So if you are concerned about climate change, you should be. If you're scared, you want to make a difference, you should be. But at the same time, there are things to look at besides just how we are screwed. Like, because it seems like no matter how much we try to make to better ourselves and be sustainable, it almost seems like sustainability isn't possible. And so it's quite possible we have to look into other options outside of sustainability to make it sustainable. Anyway, I have someone here that's delivering something, so I really have to go. The blog, it's been a rough week. Blah blah blah. Podcast host. My podcast host. Let me just quickly say, be right there. Be right there. My podcast host kind of threw me under the bus out of nowhere. I didn't see it coming. We've sorted things out, but I no longer have as big of a backlog. I will only have 5 Geekly Weeklies up at a time from now on. And then on top of that, and then only so many of my writings as well. Like I can only have like 50 episodes up now based on my new limits. Because I'm poor and I couldn't afford their big budget thing, their tier, their big tier. So sorry, I can't have a backlog anymore. That sucks. Other than that, I'm changing my routines a bit. So I'm sorry that this came out at a different time and it's got me rushing now. Anyway, my stats are all over the place. Don't worry about it. My podcast have already failed. Now it's a small library. My name is Andrew Geczy, and my brand is 99geek, found at 99geek.ca. I'm a writer writing monthly chapters of novels like episodes of TV shows, releasing them in 4 weekly segments of teaser and 3 acts on Sundays on my Patreon page. Every month it's a different book over a range of genres, and they sometimes even cross over and connect. At the end of the month, finished chapters added to PDFs attached to the bottom of every post. Finally, the finished books are self-published on Amazon. There's a dark fantasy story about a post-apocalyptic world where powerful royals rule and enslave the remaining people, struggling to survive on its last remaining landmass. There's also a sci-fi story about a people on a dying world who have built a ship to a new one, but the party is almost brought down by a terrorist organization within their ranks. Finally, there's a crossover story where characters from my other books are brought into the distant future where the prince of a far advanced civilization, one that lives in source inside my structure around Dyson Sphere, needs help defeating a twisted, power-hungry brother. And all these stories will be outside the paywall for all to enjoy, as new episodes released weekly, and the finished chapters will be attached to the bottom of every post on the site, including PDF format readable on computers, tablets, ebook readers, and phones at the end of the month. If you can understand anything I'm saying, I'm super impressed. But that's not all my stories. Also, I'm not reading that part. There's even the Geek Weekly blog which covers all the news, blah 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 blah. So stay tuned and maybe subscribe. Cool. I'm as poor as it gets, living paycheck to paycheck, and sometimes starving. And if you are too, I don't want to take food out of your mouth. Your attention is enough. Say something or comment here at the very least. Follow me on Twitter at Andrew Geczy or Instagram at WingCommander4. Live long and prosper. May the force be with you. Long live Marcy the Vampire Queen. We are the 99% Geek. Sorry, I had to rush through that. See you. Peace out. Live long and prosper.